Heading in for our first day of actually taking care of patients. It's been raining all night. Hopefully that doesn't portend how the day's gonna go. We'll see. Here we go. Heading in for our first shift. Hopefully we're in the right building. I guess we'll find out. Six it is. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And the day came to a halt. Right, Garrett? We didn't get fit tested yesterday. So, means I shaved this for nothing. So far. We'll see what happens. Gonna take it to our hospital. Heading back in. It's a mess. Alright. It is 8:45 p.m. So we just barely got back to the hotel. It's a long day. And I don't think it's hyperbole to say that I was shocked by what I saw. It's easy being out in Utah right now because we've been pretty buffered, and that may sound, I guess, a little bit harsh to the 25 individuals and their families who have lost their lives, but what Utah has experienced is nothing really. And it's problematic. Problematic in that it gives those of us who are distanced from the problem a false sense of how severe it can be. Fortunately, or unfortunately, I guess, depending on how you look at it, that distance was closed for some of us this week. A couple of us, myself included, were assigned to today and will be assigned for the next 10 shifts to what they call the OR ICU here at Columbia Hospital, actually Milstein Hospital. But essentially, I mean, not essentially, what it is they have taken an OR suite, multiple OR suites, and converted them to ICU rooms. Now, to put it in, to kind of give you guys a feel for the numbers, Milstein Hospital combined had, prior to the COVID outbreak, 110 ICU beds. I'm talking to one of the nurse manager who kind of got us placed today. He said their census runs pretty high almost all the time. They're pretty full most of the time. Very few ebbs and flows, sometimes depending on surgeries. or if surgeons are on vacation, they can see little dips. But for the most part, it's pretty consistent year round. And I imagine in a city the size of New York City, that would be the case. They have expanded due to COVID from 110 ICU beds to 253. And where those ICU beds are placed is in the OR, what used to be the OR, what used to be a med-surg floor, pretty much wherever they can fit them. They have opened up essentially a field hospital in a bubble on a field that is staffed by military right now, taking overflow patients to open up room and treatment availability for COVID patients. So we kind of knew this going in. We'd sat in training and they talked about it. And what we saw was, it's hard to describe. If you've been in an OR, maybe you've had a family member or, oftentimes you don't get to go down, but in the case of like a C-section or something, you've been able to go to an OR. Most ORs are kind of set up the same. So you walk down, there's an ante-room where surgeons and nurses can scrub in for the procedure. And then there's typically multiple operating rooms attached to one ante-room. And that's how these are set up here. Sorry, I had to take a break. Food guy here. So anyways, in these OR suites, there's 4 operating rooms. Only they're not operating rooms anymore. They're ICU rooms. So as nurses and providers, we have occupied the ante-room. And then within each OR suite, so in the case of the OR suite where I was at, there were 4 operating rooms, each room with 3 patients. And these patients are intubated, sedated, and very, very sick. It's not an ideal situation. They're short on supplies. You're kind of out of your element. You don't know where anything's at. And then due to the nature of the virus, there's a lot of attempt made to have minimal time spent within the actual patient room. And these patients are tenuous, so for the most part, what nurses would consider normal nursing care goes out the window. It's difficult to position them, it's difficult to move them. In the case of the patients that I had, they were all on multiple pressors, all intubated, tenuous in terms of their hemodynamic state, and in the case of one patient, severe DIC, which means that this patient was just bleeding everywhere. And what they've found with COVID is that there's a lot of hypercoagulability, so clots, so a lot of patients are on heparin to begin with, and then some of them develop DIC, which means you have to stop the heparin, and then a lot of them have poor hemodynamic status for various reasons, one of which is they have a lot of, some of them have had heart attacks, some just have myocarditis, and so whether that's actually secondary to the effects of COVID, I mean, it kind of presents differently for every patient, and so you have patients who their lungs are bad and then their heart gives out. You can see it in the faces of the nurses that have been there that they are exhausted. These are nurses that have battled this for a month and a half now, and we're kind of seeing things on, I think, what is a little bit of a plateau right now. And these nurses have lived through the worst part of it, and you can see how tired they are. and it's hard um, not to sympathize with that. I heard thrown around a little bit, people, and nobody in particular that I knew, but people who would say, when talking about nurses, well, or and healthcare workers, that well, this they knew that this is what they signed up for when they became healthcare workers. Nobody knows that this is what you signed up for. Um, this is unlike anything I've ever seen. Um, and I think that I could probably safely say that about all the people that I'm here with. This is a very unique situation. Um, Even when you leave the room, you feel dirty. And so psychologically, it weighs on you. Concern about, am I going to get sick? Am I going to give it to somebody else? And so you clean everything multiple times all day long. A good friend of mine, someone that I consider a good friend that I work with, I tease her a lot because she's a chronic cleaner at work. Um, but I've had to kind of channel that, and it's difficult. Mentally, it's taxing. Physically, it's taxing, and emotionally, it's difficult. I'm glad I'm here. Um, and I've gotten a lot of messages, texts, and through social media of people asking, "What's it like? What's it like? What's it like?" And I can say it's as bad as they have said it is. And I think those of us who came out here had probably hoped maybe that wasn't the case, that we would get here and that it would be different, but it's not. This is very much a city in crisis when you look at New York. This is the first time I've ever been here. Um, but everyone has told us multiple times this is not New York. There's not very many people out. For the most part, things are shut down. You can walk down. We're in, I guess, what is Upper Manhattan. And so you can walk on this upper portion of Broadway, and every store is shuttered. Nothing is open, and for good reason. And I think that it's easy, again, I'll go back to being in Utah, that it's easy to believe that we'll never have that same fate. There's been conjecture that New York was hit hard because population density and people live on top of each other. But there's cities that are far more densely populated. Um, LA actually, I think, has more people per square mile, or more cohabitations in apartments, and hasn't been as severely hit. And then there's issues or considerations that it's hitting certain segments of the socioeconomic, um, certain socioeconomic groups harder than others, and that's not the case. In fact, one of the hardest hit areas here has been Eastern Manhattan, which I guess is kind of the ritzy part of New York. I don't know much about New York. Um, it doesn't discriminate, that's for sure. Um, but what it does do is it kills, and it is not a pleasant way to die. The patients that I took care of today have been intubated for going on 15 days now, and that's difficult on the body for various reasons, to be sedated and intubated, and then their families can't come see them. And so if these patients die, they die alone, other than with the healthcare workers there. And It's an incredibly unfair situation for those families and for those individuals. I trust science. I trust medicine that we'll get things figured out. But it's going to be a long road until we get there. So, I would urge everybody to be cautious, to be a little bit empathetic, and to be willing to sacrifice a little bit for people that you don't know or people that you'll never know. It's a terrible situation for us to be in as a society and as a human race, and it can be scary at times. And I pride myself on being logical in my approach to things and to not being too hot or too cold, but it's difficult to not be intimidated. And it's difficult to not worry about what ifs. That's all I got. It was a tough day. And like I said, just a little bit shocking. So hopefully, as I get my feet under me and the people that I'm here with get their feet under them, that things will kind of improve a little bit. That we kind of know what to expect now, and so we can go back tomorrow for the next shift and kind of have a game plan going in as to how we're going to approach things. For those who are back home, it is as bad as they say it is. That's as simply as I can put it. It's getting better, but it's as bad as they say it is. So, think about it. If you pray about it. Pray for the people who have to deal with it. Pray for the nurses and the caregivers here in New York, because they're exhausted. They're exhausted, and you can see it. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here, to try to help out, even though it's for a short period of time. And I hope that those of us that are here will make at least a small difference for some of the people that we're working with.